This is the Roscoe's Wetsuit Neuro Podcast, the neurohacking show where we teach you how to optimize your cognition. Keep up to date at roscoeswetsuitneuro.com. Now here's your host, Toby Passman.
All right, welcome to another episode of the Roscoe's Wetsuit Neuro Podcast. We have just surpassed 150 episodes, so I appreciate all of your guys' support. We are going strong still. If you guys are a fan of the show, go ahead and like and subscribe to the YouTube channel, Roscoe's Wetsuit Neuro. Also, you can find the show on all the major audio platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or any of the other ones. We're on them all. On today's show, we have a really special guest, John Moyer. John is a professional hypnotist who has performed his stage hypnosis show around the United States for corporate, university, and public and private events. He's also performed around the world as a guest entertainer for Royal Caribbean Cruise Line. A graduate of film school, John's combined his production skills with hypnosis to create a YouTube channel with 200,000 subscribers focused on hypnosis and meditation content, showing people how to harness the power of their minds. So John, super excited to have you on the show with us today.
Thank you, and congratulations for being over a buck and a half into the podcast. Good for you, cranking them along. So congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah. So kind of starting out with your story, tell me about kind of your path just into hypnosis, and maybe kind of before, kind of just tell me about kind of what your life was like, and then how you originally got introduced to the field of hypnosis.
I had spent the better part of my adult life performing as a professional stand-up comedian. And along the way, you mentioned my intro at the film school, I had some independent comedy screenplays produced as well. But the one thing that was kind of interesting with me relative to comedy is, I learned in film school, when you're writing a script, any good, drama is conflict, right? So if you're going to have an interesting movie, there's got to be obviously some conflict there. You wouldn't have Star Wars if there was no Darth Vader and Princess Leia that was kidnapped. And I looked at that and put that in the context of my comedy. So I would think my mindset was all drama and conflict is funny. So my personal life was incredibly dysfunctional. So I looked at, the more jacked up I was personally, the more that I had to make fun of on stage, which was great for laughs on stage, but I was, secretly, well, maybe not even secretly, I was just a miserable human being. I wound up going through, a divorce. I was about, I think 43, 44 years old. I had 2 young kids, and I was really disenchanted with what my personal life was like, and then including my professional life, because in the early 2000s, stand-up comedy made kind of a big dramatic shift. And in the direction that it was going. There were a lot of freestanding clubs around the country that were closing down. There were places that used to be like a Tuesday through Sunday. And a lot of clubs just went to, not even being clubs, it was like the back banquet room of the Applebee's, and like Coos Bay, would be doing comedy night on Friday and Saturday night. So I was just, I was in this kind of a dark place personally and professionally. And, at that age, most people kind of know what they're doing. They've got it all figured out. And I thought I had, but then I was kind of looking down this, this foggy road that I had no idea what was going to happen. And I was actually performing at an event where there were multiple performances. And I went up and did my comedy show. And the venue was probably maybe half full for the comedy show. And then after me, they had a stage hypnotist. And I didn't know he was going to be there. I didn't know he was going to follow me, but I stuck around. And for my show, that was roughly, half full of an audience. It was standing room only for the hypnotist show. And watching that, and then of course, seeing the people on stage. And then after the show, he was selling, CDs of stop smoking and weight loss. And the people were just throwing money hand over fist to buy his stuff. And I'm like, I want to be doing that. That seems like it would have more potential for me. And of course, already having the experience as a stand-up comedian on stage, I figured it would be kind of a natural extension. So I wound up expanding my skill set to do stage hypnosis, and which on the one hand, professionally for me, I was able to go back to the bookers and the agents and the managers and the venues and say, hey, I'm doing this now. So I was able to really just go from 0 to 60 doing the stage hypnosis show. And it also opened up a lot more avenues for me because I was able to, university gigs, high school gigs. I was doing high-end corporate gigs, went on to perform for, Royal Caribbean Cruise Line. But what was interesting for me was the way that, it started to affect me personally, meaning applying hypnosis and meditation to myself. I was someone who never thought I could be hypnotized. And then, of course, as I was going through the training and then realized that I could be, and I began to notice these vast improvements in my personal life. I was happier. I was dealing with stress a lot better. The drama that used to be and dysfunction that used to be in my life was gone. The relationships, I was dating all the wrong crazy women so I could have things to joke about on stage. And I wound up meeting my wife, who's first runner-up, Mrs. America. She's Mrs. Utah. And so we just have a great personal relationship. So it was like all the boxes were checked off for all the things that I wanted to improve about my life, and even things that I didn't even know were possible. So that it all combined together and aligned to take my life and professionally and personally in a direction that I never even anticipated, but one that I am incredibly grateful for now. And my passion, of course, is showing people how they can use the power of their mind to be able to make positive differences in their life. And of course, when everything shut down during, 2020, and I wasn't performing, but I had a YouTube channel where I was putting on my hypnosis and meditation programs, and that skyrocketed and took off, something else I never thought would ever be the case. And that's pretty much what I'm dedicated to doing full-time right now, is just focused on my YouTube channel and sharing the power of the mind with people.
So John, I feel like there's kind of the cliche of, like in comedy, like there, of kind of like the messed up, depressed comedian who has, all of the chaos in their life to like share and create jokes with on stage. But is that something like, did you ever fear like, oh, if I like figure out some of my problems and actually improve myself, did you ever like worry that you would lose some of that creativity that it sounded like was really inspiring you for a great part of your career?
Well, I never was afraid that I would lose. That wouldn't even occur to me, right? Like it just never seemed to be like, oh, if I were happy and well-adjusted, that I wouldn't be funny. I just continued to thrive, on the drama and the dysfunction. It's like what we focus on, expands. So, so it was almost kind of the reverse direction for me. It's like the more I was unhappy, the more I was miserable, the more drama that was going on, the more that I could just stand up and bitch and complain about. Now, of course, the interesting thing was for me, though, that once I got myself all figured out and I got my mind straight and all of that, I retired from about stand-up comedy. I guess it must have been about 5 or 6 years ago, because the thing was I didn't really feel like I had anything to joke about or make fun of anymore, but that didn't make me feel like I couldn't be creative anymore. It just took away my desire to be, on stage. I wasn't enjoying it. It wasn't anything interesting or exciting for me anymore to, come up with jokes and do comedy. Of course, that passion in me, that live entertainment passion to be on stage, was being fulfilled, being able to do stage hypnosis. But it never worried me. But even though it did turn out to be the fact that comedic angle of dysfunction for me was gone, but I was much happier, personally, because of it.
Right. And you were able to kind of figure out how to just channel your creativity in a different avenue, it sounds like.
Yeah.
So what about like, what are, when you're doing a stage hypnosis show, what's kind of the goal? Like, what are you hoping people get out or take away from the show?
Well, when you first start to do it initially, your goal is to get people, your first goal is to get people on stage, to get people to volunteer. And then, of course, to get people to actually be hypnotized. And then, weeding out the ones that may not necessarily be as interesting on stage, or the ones that aren't hypnotized. And then, of course, having the crowd laugh. If you just look at it from that mindset early on, that's the way that, that's the structure. But as it began to, evolve, I realized that there was also an opportunity here for people to be able to see how the mind works, and that it really is something that you can, that you can tap into. Because a lot of people, when they watch a hypnosis show, they're like, oh, that's not real. That person's, faking it, or whatever the case may be. That's why it's, it's kind of interesting to see clips of hypnosis shows online, but people are just like, oh, that's not real. But when you do a hypnosis show and you're there in person and people see it, especially during corporate events, because I can't tell you how many times somebody would come up to me and go, now I know this is real. I work next to that guy every single day, and there's no way he was faking that. That was something like I've never seen before. So all these, personal relationships that people had was able to validate, the truth and the reality of hypnosis. And the thing is that when I would call for volunteers, you want to give them an incentive to come up on stage. So I would let people know that, you give a little pre-talk up front at the beginning of the show. You let people know what to expect, what's going to happen, and you tell them a little bit about how hypnosis works. So what I would say to people, if you have a goal that you're looking to achieve, if there's something that you want to change in your life, you want to make a positive difference in your life, maybe there's a negative habit that you want to get rid of. When you come up here and participate, we're going to be able to make that happen for you. We're going to be able to make that possible for you. So that was a huge incentive for people to come up on stage. I remember one woman on the cruise ship. She was what we would call the star of the show. I mean, she was just an incredible participant on stage. And she had come up to me a few days after the show, which was cool on the cruise ships, because, normally if like you do a show someplace, you leave, you go home, and you don't see these people, maybe again until you go back to do another show. But I had the chance to personally interact with everybody on the cruise ship during the rest of the cruise. And I had a woman that came up to me and she said, I had no, desire to participate, in your show. But when you said that you were going to help us be able to achieve our goals, that is something that I wanted to be a part of. And she said her whole thing was, she said she's a chocoholic. Apparently, it's like it was a huge issue with her that she was eating chocolate all the time and, chose chocolate over whatever else. And she said, I wanted to stop eating chocolate. So that was my goal. And it was like 3 or 4 days after the show. And she said, I have not had any chocolate since that night. And there's chocolate everywhere. And she goes, even my friends can't believe it, because they know what I'm like when it comes to chocolate. So you made that happen, for me in my mind. I say, well, I'm the guide. You actually were able to do that, yourself. But so that later on became one of my, my personal goals with the stage, was to let people know that they could have a good reason to come up, and that they would have the opportunity to make a change for them, themselves. And then of course, hearing from people after the fact about how they participated in the show and they were able to achieve this goal. There was something that they were able to give up in their life, in terms of a negative habit. And it also became for me this opportunity that even when people didn't volunteer, if they were just in the audience, that they could see how profound the mind was, and that this was something that everybody, has access to. So it almost, it really became not just a demonstration of entertainment for an audience, but it became an opportunity for people to realize how powerful the minds were. And then even, show them that it would be possible, for them, that it wasn't something mysterious. It was stuff that people could achieve on their own. So that was my, my biggest goal in the end, to be able to paint everything in a positive light and encourage people to, tap into this power for themselves.
So tell me a bit more about like what hypnosis is actually illustrating about the mind and how it's able to change and sort of rewire itself with these different habits and mindsets.
And to kind of understand, hypnosis, start with kind of the makeup of the brain. You've got the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. And your conscious mind is, that's the one that makes all the, the judgments. It's analytical. It's the one that you're in a beta brainwave state throughout the most of your day. That's helping you to be operating. The subconscious mind is essentially, that's, it's like the operating system. It's like a computer operating system. And that's where all your programming is. That's where everything is linked up, that tells you when this happens, or when this experience, this is how you respond. This is how you feel. So it's all of that core programming within our subconscious mind. And a lot of it's good. Some of it's negative too, because it doesn't have to make sense as to why people respond the way that they do to the subconscious mind. It just might be a case where, a good example is people, they get into a relationship and they wound up sabotaging the relationship, and they can never find a long-term relationship because at some point the subconscious mind equated relationships with pain. And if you go too far in a relationship, it's going to always end up in a disaster. It's not going to work out. So let's just nip this in the bud, early on and sabotage the relationship. So we all have all these things that are kind of linked up into our subconscious mind. In the case of like somebody who might be addicted, to chocolate, there's these negative patterns of behavior that we participate in. And one of the things that I say to people is, how many times have you been to maybe a seminar, you've seen a movie, you've read a book, whatever the case may be, and you went, this is really great information, and I'm going to start acting on this information, implementing this information, and it's going to change my life, and I'm going to be able to achieve all my goals, and I'm going to have, the money and whatever the case may be. And then a few days later, maybe a week later, you're back to the same old habits of behavior that you were before. And the reason why that is because the conscious mind says, this information makes sense. This information will benefit us and help us be able to make a change. The subconscious mind goes, yes, this information makes sense, but not for us because we can never do anything right. We can never be successful. Nothing ever works out for us. So why even bother, to try? So that's why it's so important, if you're trying to achieve a goal or make a change, you tap into the subconscious mind. And the way that hypnosis works is there's a kind of a barrier between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. It's called the critical faculty. And the analogy I use, it's like the bouncer, with a red velvet rope at the nightclub who determines, which attractive people get in, and who doesn't get in. And the subconscious mind doesn't like change. It's really lazy. It's like once something's in there, we're not doing anything differently. So what you do with the hypnosis is you essentially lower the critical faculty, you distract, the bouncer with the red velvet rope. So you're able to get right into the subconscious mind and say, okay, this is what we believe, but we're disconnecting this idea and this emotion, and now we're reconnecting it this way. So instead of hating going to the gym, we're going to love going to the gym, those type of things. And that's why the subconscious mind relative to achieving success is so important to tap into, because that's where our programming is. So if we want to be programmed for success, or making whatever change, we do it within the subconscious mind.
Right. And you mentioned there, like the conscious mind mostly operating kind of in our just, everyday kind of beta brainwave pattern. And, with the neurotechnologies that I work with, sometimes we'll be working to increase beta, say in individuals like who really struggle with, paying attention, ADHD sort of type of people. But oftentimes what we're really doing is quieting the mind down a lot, stimulating the production of, the slower alpha, theta brain waves. So in a sense, really hacking the subconscious mind. Can you tell me a little bit more about like what's actually occurring in hypnosis when you're syncing a person's mind into one of those slower brainwave patterns?
Yeah. So what's going on is you're taking them down from that beta brainwave state down into the alpha and the theta brainwave state. And it's kind of a case where you move down into those slower brainwave states. It's almost like you're becoming hyper focused on one thing, and you're shutting out the distractions, you're shutting out the noise. So you're essentially quieting the conscious mind. So when you're in those slower brainwave states, that one thing that you're focusing on is the one thing that becomes your complete object of attention. So that way, if it is something that somebody's looking to make a change, or if it's a hypnotic suggestion, they're able to focus on that and accept that. And that's what's so cool about hypnosis, because when you're in those alpha theta brainwave states, it's kind of like when you have a dream. When you're dreaming, no matter how bizarre the dream is, no matter how strange the dream is, in that dream, you're accepting that as something that's real, and you're you're acting and feeling all the, the emotions and everything you're having as if it was a real thing. So one of the things I say, it's like hypnosis is like a form of literal virtual reality, because you're experiencing something that you are believing is real, that your mind is believing is real, that your mind is telling you is real, even though you're wide awake. So in, the case of, again, like weight loss or whatever goal, the mind is believing, yeah, we are somebody that likes to work out. Yeah, we are somebody that, likes having healthy nails, so we don't bite our nails, right? I worked with somebody one time for, nail biting. So the mind is going to believe whatever you're telling it, and it's going to accept that that's who you are. And consequently, the patterns of behavior that you have, line up that way. And one time I had a woman on stage who was a medical doctor, and the hypnotic suggestion I gave her was that she was missing her belly button. So when I would do these things where I give people different suggestions kind of at the same time, so we had all these kind of multiple things happening on stage. So, I'm talking to somebody on this side of the stage, and all of a sudden this woman who was a doctor gets up and she starts walking around the stage. She's looking under chairs, she's looking behind stuff. And of course, the audience is seeing this and they're laughing. And I go up to her and I'm like, what are you doing? And she's like, my belly button is missing. And, of course, everybody is laughing, but she goes, I'm a medical doctor. This is physically impossible. It doesn't happen, but yet my belly button is missing. And it was really interesting to see kind of how her mind was almost kind of a conflict, because she knew that it was something that was impossible medically, but yet her mind was telling her, no, this is real. Your belly button is missing, and we've got to find it. And to me, that was one of like the greatest examples of showing how powerful, the mind is by telling you something and allowing you to believe something that wasn't necessarily, the case. So that's why it can be so powerful in terms of, real life applications and not just stuff that happens on stage.
Is it essential to actually identify like the core patterns that may be resulting in people's self-sabotage, or can you, make these suggestions to kind of reprogram someone's subconscious mind without really, figuring out, okay, why is it that this person thinks or believes what they do?
Yeah. And that is something that there actually is kind of a lot of, debate or discussion about. It's like, do we really need to figure out why something is the way that it is within a person's mind to be able to address that problem? Or can we just say that we know that there's a challenge or a problem there? We don't necessarily need to figure out what caused it, and we can just give them, empowering patterns of behavior. So that is something that, I don't know that I would necessarily fall on one category or the other, but it is something that a lot of people, talk about. But I worked with somebody one time. They were curious. They had, I don't want to use the word phobia because it wasn't really a phobia, but they were an adult, absolutely could not stand peanut butter. The smell of peanut butter it didn't just disgust them, it gave them anxiety. Like they would choke and they would gag, and they, their entire lives, they were just repulsed by peanut butter. And they were curious as to why was this the case? It wasn't a debilitating mindset for them, but they were a little curious as to what was going on with peanut butter. So we did the hypnosis session, and they were able to recall an experience they had when I think they were about 2 years old, where they were in a high chair and they were being fed by a relative, and the relative had made a peanut butter sandwich and gave it to them as the 2-year-old to eat. And the 2-year-old was playing with the food and, wasn't eating. And the adult got really upset and really angry and was picking up the peanut butter sandwich and kind of shoving it in the child's mouth and trying to force the child to eat this peanut butter sandwich. And, she was crying, she was upset, sensations of, choking, not being able to, breathe. And it was like, so it was all of the things that this individual was feeling as an adult when they were around peanut butter. They were able to now trace back and recall it came from this experience that that happened for them when they were 2 years old. And I gave them some suggestions, kind of be able to help them, deal with it. Like I said, it wasn't life debilitating, but kind of nice that they could take out a jar of peanut butter for their kids and not, get grossed out. But that to me was a really interesting experience about how something small like that became something pretty big linked up into their mind, that they had no idea that, but whenever peanut butter was out, they choking and gagging and feelings of anxiety.
Yeah. Yeah. And without kind of diving in with whatever that might be, hypnosis, therapy, EMDR, like some modality where you're exploring the subconscious mind, it's like, yeah, how would you ever know that what you're experiencing in the present day is at all linked back to something that happened very early on in life?
Yeah. And that's one of those things where a lot of it, hypnosis is a very kind of personal experience. And when I say personal, it means, everybody's kind of, everybody's different. They've got their own things that are happening with them, and they've got their own responses and their own reactions. So a lot of that comes down to, the hypnotist that is working with somebody to be able to evaluate, the entirety, the entire whole of what this individual is doing. That's why one-on-one hypnosis can be so powerful, because essentially there is a feedback loop. You can cater the hypnosis session to the individual. You can work with the individual based on how they respond to things, versus, when I put out a hypnosis program or a meditation program, it's one of these things where I have to do my best to create it as a one size fits all. I know that it's not going to, be for everybody, but I also know that there are going to people, that respond to it. And that is also one of the things that I say when it comes to hypnosis, is that there's no right way, there's no wrong way. There's only the way that if something works for you or not. So if somebody's looking to explore hypnosis, if they're looking to experience it, I always say, look around. There's a lot of places out there. If you go online, and you're just putting in your headphones and listening, and you go, wow, I had a really good experience with this. Didn't necessarily like, the way this hypnotist talked, or I did like the way that this person talked. And so people can experiment, and they can just, see what works and see what's right for them when it comes to, experiencing a hypnotic state.
John, do you see like your work as like a stage hypnotherapist as different than, say like a clinical hypnotherapist, or is it just addressing kind of different issues? And it sounds like kind of the same mechanisms are at play in terms of kind of activating a person's subconscious mind and reprogramming these beliefs. Do you see many differences there?
Yeah, I mean, there are, there's a lot of considerable, differences, and not though to, talk down, the field of psychology or psychiatry or anything like that, because, there's a valuable process there that, people can experience. I think there's a lot of things that when it comes to everyday life, everyday trauma or dysfunction, that we can, much easily or more effectively address. There was a study done, I don't know, it was like 10 or 12 years ago. And it was in a medical journal. And they showed that if somebody went to a psychiatrist or a psychologist, they would have to go for 600 sessions in order to see, I think it was like a 36% success rate. So basically go 600 times for the opportunity, 30% success. People that went to hypnotherapy, worked with a hypnotist, they found it was somewhere around a 90% success rate within 6 sessions. So there was, quite a big, difference there. And this is just me, speaking, not necessarily, because I have no experience in psychology or psychiatry, though I did talk to a few in my younger years. But I think lots of times there is this issue where it's like, okay, you have this problem. To use a car analogy, it's like you're driving down the road and you feel that your car is pulling to the right. So it's like, okay, well, that your car is pulling to the right. So you have to physically turn your steering wheel more to the left to be able to drive a straight line. That's how you fix it. Don't know why your car is pulling to the left. Or pulling to the right. It's just going to pull in that direction. But if you do this, you can, stay down the center of the lane. Whereas in like hypnosis or hypnotherapy, somebody can go, oh, well, your car is pulling to the right because you need an alignment. So let's give it an alignment. Great. Now you can drive into a straight line. So I think there's more of being able to tap into, the mechanism of the mind that is making these connections happen, and be able to, rewire the mind, pull the plug out from one connection, plug it into another connection, and have, more success that way. And it is interesting because I'm a member of the National Guild of Hypnotists. That's where I went when I did my hypnotherapy training. And it's fascinating how different parts of the country have different laws relative to clinical hypnosis, hypnotherapy, even being able to perform a hypnosis show. And a lot of that comes down to that there's a lot of lobbyists in other fields that fight hard against that, because there's a lot more money to be made continuing to write prescriptions for antidepressants or anti-anxiety medication and those sort of things. So it's like we want to continue to feed this financial opportunity, as opposed to successfully allowing people another way to be able to make change successfully without big pharma being involved.
And it's interesting what you point out, that even though a psychiatrist or psychologist may have had plenty of years studying the various mechanisms in which the brain works, and has a lot more formal education potentially than a stage hypnotist or hypnotherapist. But as you're saying with that study, that might not necessarily matter as far as the actual effectiveness in terms of being able to work with the person's mind to get them the results that they want.
Yeah. And it's like I said, I don't diminish what is there for, the opportunity for, working with a psychologist or a psychiatrist, because, there are some people, they have some pretty traumatizing experiences. There's some things that are, are very damaging to them emotionally and mentally, that they need, some heavy lifting to help, work this through. What is always find curious is that, there's people that I've worked with, whether, when I was doing a one-on-one session, my wife is actually, after I kind of started my journey into hypnosis, my wife wound up certifying in hypnosis as well. So she does work with people one-on-one. But it's always a fascinating thing that we hear, that it always seems to be people's like last resort. We hear from people that, I was doing this, I was doing this, nothing worked. Okay, I guess I'll try hypnosis. Or it's one of those things that's kind of dismissed up until the point where nothing else works. So they're like, well, what do I have to lose? I've done everything else. Maybe this is silly, but I'll give it a shot. And then when all is said and done, they're like, wow, I'm noticing a difference.
Yeah. Well, John, tell me about, in terms of growing your YouTube channel with this hypnotist content. What did you find as far as like what that process was like, and just being a successful content creator?
It was something that happened by happenstance, that I wasn't even planning, didn't even realize it could be a thing. And, it must have been maybe 5 years ago, 6 years, somewhere in there. One of the things that hypnotists would do when they were done with the show is they would say, okay, great. Now I've got CDs. You want to stop smoking. You want to lose weight, whatever the case may be. And when I first started doing hypnosis, I was kind of resistant to they call it back of the room sales, because like, oh, it's just one more thing, that you have to do. And I was booked for a corporate event in Las Vegas, and it was for a network marketing company. If there's one thing I know about people in network marketing, these are people that think outside the box. These are people that are a little bit more, ambitious. They're a little bit more, daring. So I said, well, I'll try to sell some stuff. I'll print out, I'll get 100 CDs put together. And it was just a case of me, making my own, CDs. It was a pretty easy thing to do. So I had like 100 CDs. After the show, it was crazy because they had just swarmed the table where my wife was, and I completely sold out of 100 CDs. I was charging $20 a CD, and it was gone. I'm like, wow, there really is something to selling some merchandise after the show. But the thing that's was becoming an issue was that people didn't have CD players anymore, right? Their computers, weren't even having a CD-ROM drive. So then there was this big debate within the stage hypnosis community. Well, what do we do now? How do we do, should we do thumb drives and put MP files on the thumb drive? So, comedians were going out and mass producing thumb drives with this content on it. And I thought, well, maybe what I'll do is I'll put my, I'll make the digital downloads available, on my website. So if they want to purchase it, they can go there. But if I put them on YouTube, maybe that would be something where people would go, oh, I like this, so I'll go buy it. And my YouTube channel wasn't really a thing. Like, I put stuff up there, but then I wasn't paying attention. I wasn't looking. And, I look into YouTube, a few months later, and I had one video, well, actually several videos that were doing of these hypnosis programs that were doing really well. And what I didn't realize is that people would use YouTube as the platform to experience this stuff. So it wound up kind of taking off in that way. So I completely overhauled my channel to make sure it was nothing about, or it was only about, the hypnosis and meditation programs. There weren't clips of my show or any of that stuff on there anymore. It was just, because YouTube likes, if you've got a channel, they want it to be about one specific thing so they can attract that particular audience to, that one specific thing. So it's all about subsets of subsets. And people tend to like my content to fall asleep to. So they want to be able to put it on, fall asleep, and then even have something continuously play while they're asleep at night. So most of my stuff on my channel are these 8-hour programs that, somebody climbs into bed, they put it on, takes them through a hypnotic induction, kind of speaks to them being able to fall asleep. And, maybe if there's whatever changes that they may be looking to do. And typically the first hour, maybe hour and 15 minutes is, the unique original part. And then the rest of that's kind of designed so it can kind of loop for the 8 hours. And, once I made my channel all about that, people began finding me and subscribing. When I started to do it, it took me about 3 years to hit the first 100,000 subscribers. And then I hit the second 100,000. I just crossed 200,000 subscribers, just did that at the beginning of September. And of course, all organic. It was just a case where people found my stuff. It resonated with them. They would share it. They would recommend it. I hear from people all the time about how they recommend me and they share my content. And I hear from people that tell me, how it's benefiting them and how it's made a difference for them. Of course, I hear from the people too that tell me to shut up and, they hate my voice and I'm keeping them awake. And so, which is what I say, just, find what works for you. I'm not for everybody, but there's enough out there, for everybody. And there's something, for each someone.
I feel like the YouTube trolls, that's such a inherent part of YouTube. What if you didn't have those, it's like, are you even like making much of a buzz on YouTube? Like, yeah, people always have something negative to say.
It is kind of funny. And most of my, the predominance of my views come, overnight. So, if you look at my, my analytics, it's kind of down here during the day, then around 7 o'clock at night, it goes up, midnight, 1 o'clock, and then, down the beginning of, when the day starts. So, I'll wake up. So needless to say, if most of my traffic happens at night, then, it's happening while I'm asleep. And then, I wake up in the morning, I'm like, all right, well, let's see what people are saying on YouTube, this morning. And of course, there's comments that get proved. There's some comments that, get held, because of filters for language and all this, other stuff. And it really is interesting to kind of see some angry people, some critical people. And yeah, you really don't appreciate how much of a thick skin you have to have until you kind of get to where now it's like, I can laugh about a lot of stuff. Now I'm like, send my wife, I'm like, look what this person said. Oh my gosh. But, there was a time there in the beginning, it was just like, you're like, you wanted to crawl up in the fetal position and cry. And I'm like, well, hypnosis can help with that. So
there you go. Well, John, what are you hoping to do kind of going forward with your career in hypnotism? Like, what are you trying to do? More stuff on YouTube, more live shows? Like, what ideas do you have going forward?
Yeah, I've kind of decided to take a sabbatical, from performing. I don't miss it. It's much more fun to stay at home with my family and just, make my YouTube videos. Of course, I've been offered a bunch of stuff, offered to do gigs and things that, I just said, no, I'm just kind of taking a break for now. And, really, I feel that I am in kind of the sweet spot where I'm at right now. I'm enjoying being able to be creative. I can take my, my writing experience and my video experience, my hypnosis experience, and, be able to put stuff out there for people to, help benefit them, and everything that I share on my YouTube channel, all the themes, all the things that I talk about, are all things that are what were effective for me, that kind of took me out of kind of this dark place where I was in about, 12 years ago, and allowed me to come from a space where, I just wake up every day going, I just am so grateful, right? I get to do this. I get to have fun. My wife and I spend probably 90% of our, our time together. It's like we never get tired of, being around each other. So it's like, I just feel like I'm living in a great space right now where I can just continue to create content for people that they can, use to, help improve the quality of their lives. And, so for now, I'm just saying, I'm just kind of, I'm really happy in this place. I'm really feeling fulfilled and enjoying this. And so it's like, do I go back out to do some more shows? Maybe not. I do have, though, all of this kind of new insight is giving me some, ideas for some more screenplays. In fact, I had lunch last week with, the producer that did 5 of my screenplays quite a while back. And he's like, dude, let's make another movie. You've got some great stories in you now, and let's do this. So I kind of feel like some of the stories that I had to tell now come from that space of what I would call consciousness, a higher evolution of thinking. So I'm like, all right, I've got a few stories in me to, maybe write another screenplay again.
Nice. Well, John, if people want to connect with you, follow your work, see your videos, where would you direct them to?
They can find me on YouTube, John Moyer. Just type in, YouTube, and you can type in John Moyer Hypnosis on YouTube. If you type in John Moyer, you'll mostly find my videos, but you may find some videos of John Moyer, who is the bassist from the metal band Disturbed. Apparently people miscommunicate, and I get tagged for a lot of stuff in him on Twitter and Instagram. But find me on YouTube, John Moyer Hypnosis. My website is johnmoyer.com, and I've got more information about me there, and then of course links to where all my stuff is on the platforms online.
Awesome. Well, I highly recommend you guys go check that out. And if you guys enjoyed the show today, I would love it if you could give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts. And also, you can go ahead and subscribe to our newsletter at roscoeswetsuitneuro.com to keep up to date with all of the latest. We're going to be starting to offer neuromodulation services in person to clients interested in peak cognitive performance in the Miami-Fort Lauderdale area beginning in December of 2021. John, I really enjoyed our conversation today. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it very much.